Good morning, Zitah. It's a pleasure to have you on one of my latest podcasts, Natter with Nick. My name is Nick Reeks. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Teleware PLC and delighted to be joined by Zitah McMillan, who is on a really exciting journey in her business life. 2.5 years ago, she set up a business called Predictive Black and currently they're one of the co-founders and the CEO. In a nutshell, I think it's a machine learning and artificial intelligence project consistently improving and giving increasingly refined predictive forecasts. So good morning to you, Zitah. I hope you're well.
Good morning, Nick. I am very happy to be here.
Good, and intrigued about your business. Just tell us a little bit more of what it is and what it does.
So you actually nailed it. We are a predictive forecasting software. So we set up a couple of years ago with the intention of trying to bring big data benefits to SMEs and trying to think, well, how might we do that in a way that is genuinely useful for their business rather than nice to have information? You know, there's a lot of nice to have information out there. So we created a service around revenue, costs and cash forecasting, managing supplier and client management and debtor days, but all rooted back to deep sector analysis. So whatever sector you're in is what you're benchmarked to and your predictive performance is benchmarked against.
Right, and I think you're right in the right space at the right time, I suggest, because in our business, we're trying to help business be 20% more productive, save on overheads. And so you've got to predict the future. You've got to predict from the analysis you've got in that big, massive pot of big data, what to use and when. So is your business going well?
It is, thank you. Yeah, we only formally launched about 2 months ago. So we're still kind of riding that little cusp of, oh my goodness, it's all very exciting. And it's always, you know, in startup world, it's exciting, stressful, seat of your pants stuff the entire time. But it's brilliant, actually. And it's almost now like a proper job again, you know, that way when you'd kind of you're employed by a bigger company, so you know you have to follow the constraints of a bigger company, whereas now we're starting to get to that place, and it's it's exciting times.
Yes, and so just sort of going into some questions which will be really interesting for the viewers, I'm sure. A couple of months ago you talked about how global changes like the 2008 recession are both winners and losers. Unfortunately, the losers, but great for the winners. Like the approach, and things come out of it. So, what do you think can be learned from the success stories of the pandemic?
I think, well, there's two different parts to success, isn't there? There's the success of the unintended success in a way, and there's a lot of talk about the government having bought materials and supplies and how that went. So there is some almost artificial success in a sense from certain sectors, and where companies have been able to provide the government with the materials that they needed at prices they really shouldn't have had to pay. So there's that, and then there's the success, the genuine success, and I'm sorry to anyone listening who's in one of the first camps, but you know, I sort of separated out a little bit. There's the genuine success stories of companies who have risen to the occasion and found new ways to do business. So if I think about restaurants in particular, you know, those restaurants who were able to work out in a cost-effective and possibly even marginal profit level of being able to do a takeaway service or delivery service, you know, what a fantastic way to think about their business when that's not their world. You know, they're not a takeaway. These restaurants are not for takeout boxes. So I think when you think about those sorts of businesses and the creativity, and I think, you know, through crisis, creativity is often born. I think the arts world is where we'll see it come next year, actually. I think there's a lot of talk already about the post-pandemic cultural explosion that will take place, and we'll all need it. You know, we will all want that to happen. And I think there's a lot of smaller businesses, actually, and particularly I follow a lot of small businesses. You know, as an SME, you support other SMEs. I follow a lot on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I see an enormous amount of creativity in how they are trying to change the way they do business, offer slightly different things to their clients, and really work through, well, what are the advantages? If you can't get out and meet people, if you can't go and do what you would normally do, how do you still stay in business and bring that creativity to bear? So, you know, at the same time, the downside is a lot of the smaller shops, for example, high streets, I think there will still be a lot of changes. Although small businesses on the high streets are doing really well. You know, if you look at the high streets, if you're allowed to get to them, there's a lot of people who are following the shop local rule.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And so I know you've been planning this business for a while, but to launch a new business in current circumstances with a great solution and a great market share, but how is it going, and how are you getting people's time in order to flaunt what you've got?
So it's a stupid thing to do, isn't it? I mean, what a ridiculous thing to do to launch a business. And yet we are not alone. A lot of businesses have launched throughout the course of this year. And one of the things, because part of what our service offers is scenario planning, and we spoke to an enormous amount of people, finance directors, accountants, all these people who are at the very pointy end of not quite panic, but what the hell do we do here? You know, we need to figure out, can we make it and how will we make it? So we won an Innovate grant, which we were thrilled to get as part of the COVID response grant that the government set out. And we created a scenario planning function. So using machine learning or traditional roll forward on your prior year's numbers. So that really gave us an entry point to talk to people that was something specific that they need now, actually. So rather than 15 different versions of an Excel spreadsheet that you can't visualize unless you are a whiz at exporting charts and creating charts in Excel, which lots of people are, by the way. I mean, there are some Excel wizards out there. So how do you do scenario planning fast, efficiently, with real-time data that is visualized? So that actually gave us an entry conversation point where I think had it just been the software that we created, maybe it would have been a bit more challenging, because everyone literally went into close down, you know, this is the software we've got, this is the service we've got. So we definitely benefited from having something slightly new to bring.
And so how are you doing against the competition, and what is your cutting edge that says you should buy from Predictive Black rather than a bigger company, a more established company? I mean, you're not carrying any baggage, clearly, but
no.
What is
so there's no legacy software, right? So the brilliant thing, and you guys know this in spades, but you know, legacy software is a drag on all sorts of size businesses. So because we're a brand new software, we're cloud based, you don't download it, there's no constant maintenance, you know, it's all happening for you. That is a really nice selling point, but it doesn't make you unique. There's a lot of that out there. Yeah. So our selling point is that because we assimilate billions of data points now, we're at kind of almost the 3 billion data point mark in our industry analysis, and we make that data relevant and meaningful to your business in your sector, then we connect that to your open banking data or your financial data and your accounting data to do proper predictive forecasts based on the real world. I mean, my anti-sales message is we take away any of the wishful thinking of forecasting, which if you're kind of keen on a bit of wishful thinking is not the best sales message. But it really does, because it's non-biased. You know, the machine is not biased to whether you would like to get 5% more sales next year. You know, it doesn't care. It's going to tell you what it knows from what you've told it. Yeah. So that really is a significant point of difference. There's a lot of companies out there saying they're using machine learning. They're really probably just using applied statistical modeling, which is fine, but it's not the big machine learning power that we're able to deploy. And we're part of Microsoft for Startups, so you know, we're really well placed for that as well. We get all the benefits of the Microsoft universe, which is fabulous.
Sure, that's great, thank you. So you're a strong advocate of open banking. How do you think this has driven fintech innovation?
It is astonishing, actually. So go back a few years, and when the Competition and Markets Authority was talking about competition in banking, it was as if in the world of banking, it had come to an end. You know, the big banks were absolutely, and no matter what they'll say now, if you went back and you look at what they were saying at the time, they were very quietly disparaging about the whole benefits of it, you know, and really opening up their world to a bunch of people like me, you know, how, you know, we can't be trusted. So there was all these issues around it. But in fairness, you know, the government and the CMA and then the legislation through Payment Service Director and all that kind of stuff really pushed the banks to open up. Now there's a couple of thousand firms using open banking data, people like me who are registered with the open banking directory, and it has completely transformed the opportunities both for consumers and increasingly for small businesses. So I think we're just at the start, actually. You know, we are very much still at the start. I see next year, I see huge amounts of creativity, by the way. I love watching new fintechs. I'm kind of like, I never feel envy that they've come up with a great idea. I'm always like, yes, come on, let's get out there. You know, I wonder if we can work together. You know, wouldn't it be fabulous? Let's support each other. So I just see all this amazing creativity, all enabled by that desire to create greater competition in a very locked in world, which was banking. And I think, you know, the opportunities across multiple sectors, obviously there's open communications being consulted on now. So, you know, that will again, I think, be a game changer. So the fact that financial services was right at the vanguard of this movement is so delightful, actually. It's so unexpectedly delightful that I just think it will only go from strength to strength. The more people like me who can talk about it passionately as a user of it, a beneficiary of it, and a business beneficiary, I think, you know, the world is definitely its oyster.
So is your target market new SME startups? Is that
not really, not new. So I like to talk to all the new startups, and I like to build our relationships and see if we can support and how might we help. But really, our software is for firms who are slightly larger. So if you're in the sort of £1 million turnover bracket and up, then our software does a lot of the heavy lifting. So the companies have already, to get to that point in their revenue life cycle, they are process heavy already. You'll know this from talking to a lot of these companies, right? They've created processes, bits of tech have sort of, you know, limpet like attached themselves to them, and suddenly they can't then move as quickly as maybe they would have done previously. And there's more people. Maybe as the owner of the business, you're not as close to the numbers as you were previously. You know, you don't have that gut instinct as to where your clients are going. So you start to hit the growth curve. And so that's where we would pitch ourselves, because we then can really step in and support, both in terms of predicting, you know, your cash position, helping manage debt, you know, all those kind of things that get a bit more difficult the larger you get. So yeah, so we talk to those sorts of SMEs, but we also talk to SME lenders and portfolio companies who are managing a large number of other companies, because what they can do, it turns into more of a reporting tool, actually. So without having to dig in and say to every FD of everyone, you know, can I just see your Excel spreadsheet? What's your 13-week rolling forecast, please? It's a nightmare. You know, I've been on the receiving end of that request. It's awful. Then you can plug it all in, and, you know, suddenly that all gets smoothed out. The reporting becomes much easier. So we have sort of 3 different places that we play.
Yeah, we had a conversation last week about predictive analysis, and we'd done some internally, and we got the accuracy to high 90s, 98%, I believe. And the stats that came out of it were almost unbelievable. A certain customer size, we've no chance of winning.
Yeah.
A certain time when you engage with a customer makes a huge difference to success compared to other ones. That's clearly, it's got to be about research and when people want to spend money. And you've got to take notice of those, like saying, why are you trying to punch around in areas which isn't your sector? You know, if for example, a business isn't successful in 1,000+ employees, don't talk to business with 1,000+ employees, because your statistic says you're not going to win it.
Yeah.
But these are the huge advantages that come around with these, if you can analyze it and actually follow that information.
Yeah, and actually what's really interesting is if you're setting your business strategy, you know, and you're working through, if you're on a team, an executive team, or if you're the MD or whatever, and you're setting that plan and you think, well, I'd like to win, you know, I'd like to target large automotive manufacturers or whatever it is. And to your point, Nick, you then have to do the research, say, well, do I have any right to win there? and sometimes yes, sometimes no. But if you waste all that effort and energy going after people who are never going to buy your service, then you're just wasting time, that, and there is an opportunity cost for all of that. So I think from my perspective, the more you can learn, the more data you can assimilate, and the more relevant and meaningful that data is, that you can then help make better business decisions. Absolutely, that's where it ought to be.
Yeah, verticals is a really important thing, particularly for SMEs as well, because I know from past experience, you suddenly say a sales lead comes up for, let's say it's the manufacturing industry, and people will give you very very candid questions like, give me an example of 3 customers you've dealt with in the manufacturing industry with an employee size of X to Y, otherwise I won't do business with you. So if you're moving from vertical to vertical, you've got to find a way of doing that and giving confidence to the potential new customers. Otherwise, stay in the verticals you're used to. And I'm sure your statistics will show that.
I'm sure, yeah. And actually, it's really fascinating because there will be businesses who can traverse the different verticals with absolute ease. But your point is absolutely spot on, that they don't necessarily have the credibility, even if they can do it technically, even if their service would be amazing. If you don't have the credibility that you've built, it's much harder, so you do need, I mean, it's interesting, as individuals, we all talk about transferable skills, businesses have the same thing, but they almost have less license. And I think one of the downsides actually of a pandemic and the situation we're all in is that there is less willingness to take any risk. So whereas if you're in a situation where everything's growing, the economy's ticking over really well, even going, increasing, maybe business is more open-minded to try a supplier who hasn't got really, can't answer those 3 different points. I've got 3 clients in exactly your space. Maybe they're more willing to take a risk. I don't see that as the case right now. I think everyone is literally hunkered down into, I must go with what I know, because the risks are so prevalent in the business elsewhere that why make that another risk?
Yeah, and I think sometimes they are over the top, because if you're trying to help them move from X to Y, let's say it's from on-premise into the cloud with the hybrid solution, and you've done it in another vertical, it's still the same rules, it's still the same technical rules, but I think they want some confidence behind that. But they are the questions you get asked. So if any of the viewers out there are thinking of, I can do any vertical, they just need to have a little think about that. Where's my case studies? How are you going to do that? And of course, you've always got to get that first case study.
Yeah.
And
what's really fascinating, and I'm as guilty as this as the next business owner, right? So I always think, so I trained in advertising, and I always think about, what's my right to win? Do I have any right to win? And the default position is yes, because my service is fabulous. But that's not the question you're asking yourself. The question you're asking yourself is, from the other side of the table, why should they think I am right for them? What right do I have to be in that room to win their business? And you've really got to flip your mindset from, my product, my service is awesome, to what are the reasons they're going to say no, and how can I, without just going, well, here are all my product attributes, so you'd be an idiot not to say yes. How can I really understand their business? Like, what is it about their business that means I would be a good fit? And I think it's like having that different way of looking at it.
Yeah. So just finally then, you describe yourself as a transformational leader and advisor, which with your background that I've seen, I understand why you've written that down and concur. So you've spoken at recent conferences, you're in the fintech world. What do you say the future holds for business and yourself?
I think what's reassuring is that businesses are starting up the whole time, and in the life cycle of any business, in any economy, businesses start, businesses fail. So I don't look at the next 3 years as being some form of hiatus for that. I still think good businesses will fail, not because of the pandemic necessarily, just because businesses fail all the time. That's, if you can't get the sales, if you haven't got your product market fit right, if sometimes if you just don't get lucky. So I think there is a sense that almost all of the normal rules have been suspended, but that is not the case. So just and I fear a little bit that the pandemic will get blamed for things that it's not necessarily responsible for. That actually just bad businesses will go to the wall, and that's natural, you know. So I think there'll be a little bit of that. I think that, you know, maybe we'll look back in a few years and go, maybe that wasn't quite the case. But I also think that a lot of creative thought will go into how will we live and work in the future. And, you know, personally, I'm not intending to get an office space. You know, I've worked remotely for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't see that changing. I love the fact that I can work with colleagues who live anywhere. You know, there is no reason in my mind for a job description in the future to say must be London based or, you know, whatever. I think, you know, wouldn't it be fabulous if all that disappeared and you could actually say we become a truly flexible workforce? You know, we truly can be anywhere, work anywhere. And so the opportunities for people to work in great companies actually are transformed. You know, they are able to work in places they ordinarily wouldn't, you know, and wouldn't that be fabulous?
If people are saying it's got to be geographically placed, I don't think people will apply for jobs like that anymore, because I think they're backward thinking.
Yeah.
And, you know, the innovation of, say, Barbados, when they've now given incentives to people to go and live in Barbados tax-free, because they know that they can work wherever they want in any business,
Do
to
you know
have
though, Nick, I
conversations
had
like
never
we're having now.
considered relocating to Barbados. Now I'm thinking I've missed a trick. Now I'm
You wouldn't be
thinking
paying any tax, and you might have a bit of sun on your back. So,
I
I mean,
might,
that,
you know, that is a really, and looking out and it's wintry and cold. You Barbados, you say?
yes, absolutely. So I think that ends us on a real high of dreaming that we're going to be on that plane to go to Barbados. Zitah, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure the viewers will find it very interesting. I find it very interesting, and the greatest success for your business.
Thank you very much, Nick, and have a wonderful, wonderful time off if you get any.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks.